We're going to start today's reading corner with The Bungalow Mystery from Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew Mysteries by Carolyn Keene. And how can you go wrong with Nancy Drew? So sit back and enjoy. Today we'll read, I don't know how long, but I think it'd be nice. Nice to read some Nancy Drew. It's been a while. So, Nancy Drew, The Bungalow Mystery. Chapter 1. A Blinding Storm. "Look at those black clouds," Nancy Drew pointed out to her friend Helen Corning, who was seated beside her in the bow of a small red motorboat. Nancy, blue-eyed and with reddish-gold hair, was at the wheel. She gazed anxiously across a long expanse of water to the distant shores of Twin Lakes. The Pinecrest Motel, where the 18-year-old girl and her older friend were staying, was almost 2 miles away on the smaller of the two lakes. Helen Corning, dark-haired and petite, looked at Nancy with concern. "I think we're in for a cloudburst," she said, "and Twin Lakes becomes as rough as the ocean in a storm." A few minutes later, angry waves began to beat against the sides of the boat. "And there are life preservers aboard, right, Helen?" Nancy asked. "No," Helen answered fearfully. Nancy set her chin grimly. Although it was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky was becoming increasingly dark. The pleasant summer breeze, which had been blowing earlier, was turning into a stiff wind. "It's getting harder to keep on course," Nancy remarked, gripping the wheel more tightly. As she increased the boat's speed to maximum, the craft fairly leapt through the water, dashing spray into the girls' faces. "I wonder if there are any raincoats in the lockers?" asked Helen. "Please look," Nancy requested. "We'll be drenched by the time we reach the motel dock." Luckily, Helen found 2 plastic coats. She slipped into one, then helped Nancy into the other. A streak of forked lightning cut across the sky, momentarily disclosing a thick mass of ugly clouds. The lightning was followed by an ominous crack of thunder, which caused the girls to jump. "This is terrible," Helen wailed. A moment later, the wind began to howl. It struck the boat with a force which made Helen grasp the railing next to her for support. Another dazzling flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and simultaneously a deluge of rain began to descend. Nancy peered ahead into the dimness. The shoreline had vanished, and the blinding rain made it impossible for her to see more than a few feet beyond the bow of the boat. "At least we have half a tank of fuel," Nancy announced, trying to sound optimistic. "We'll reach shore soon, I'm sure." "I wouldn't bet on that," Helen said nervously. A worried expression furrowed the young pilot's brow. The boat was making little progress against the wind. If anything happened to the motor, they would be at the mercy of the waves. A few minutes later, the rain came down even harder. The wind continued to blow a raging gale, and the waves seemed higher. The girls leaned forward, trying to get their bearings. As a jagged ribbon of lightning illuminated the path ahead, Helen screamed, "A boat!" Nancy froze with horror. A tremendous log was floating directly into the path of the motorboat. Her heart pounding, the young skipper gave the wheel a vicious turn, but not quickly enough. The splintering crash, the bow of the boat struck the log. The impact sent Helen sprawling to the deck. Nancy clung to the steering wheel, but was thrown forward violently. "Helen, are you hurt?" she asked. "I'm all right. Are you?" She stammered as Nancy helped Helen to her feet. Both girls were breathing heavily. By now the small boat was listing sharply to starboard. Nancy saw instantly that the log had torn a jagged hole in the side of the craft. Water was pouring in rapidly. "Quick, Helen," Nancy ordered tersely. "You bail and I'll stop the leak." She sprang forward, tore off her raincoat, and stuffed it into the hole. Helen, meanwhile, found a rusty can and began to bail. Despite their efforts, water continued to pour through the opening. "Let's shout for help," Nancy cried above the wind, but she doubted that there was any other craft in the lake. And here is what's happening. I wouldn't want to be in that situation, would you? The girls cupped their hands to their lips and shouted frantically. Their only answer was the howl of the gale and a steady beat of rain. "Louder," Helen urged, and they screamed until they were hoarse. "It's no use," Nancy said at last. "We'll have to think of something else." Just then, Nancy saw a giant wave bearing down on them. She met it head on, hoping to ride the crest, but the deluge of water almost inundated the girls. They were flung overboard, and the motorboat sank to the bottom of the lake. An excellent swimmer, Nancy managed to get her head above water almost immediately. Her first thought was for Helen. What had become of her? Treading water, Nancy glanced about. Helen was not in sight. I must find her, Nancy thought desperately. She may have been injured. Then several yards away, Nancy saw a white hand flash above water. With powerful crawl strokes, she plowed through the waves to the spot the hand had vanished. Nancy made a neat surface dive. Opening her eyes, she tried to see through the clouded water, but to no avail. At last she surfaced and drew in a deep breath. Clearing her eyes, Nancy was relieved to spot her friend several feet ahead. Helen was floating on her back. Strong strokes brought Nancy directly to her friend. My arms feel numb, Helen said weakly. Guess I hit them on the boat. Don't worry, said Nancy. Just lie still. I'll tow you to shore. Nancy, however, had grave misgivings regarding her ability to accomplish this in the turbulent water. She needed every ounce of strength to swim the distance alone. Could she manage to save Helen? The storm had made the water very cold. Nancy prayed that she would not get a cramp and both girls go down. Hold your breath when you see a wave coming, she instructed Helen as they started off. At frequent intervals, Nancy shouted for help, although she felt it was wasted energy. On and on they went. Helen noticed finally that Nancy's breathing showed the great strain on her. Save yourself, she begged. Go to shore without me. Never, said Nancy as a huge wave bore down on the two girls, smothering them in its impact. Feebly, Nancy struggled back to the surface with her burden. One more like that, and I'll be through, she said to herself. Just then, Nancy thought she detected a voice above the roar of the wind. Was it just her imagination, or had she really heard someone call? Help! She screamed. This time there could be no mistake, for she distinguished the words, Hold on, I'm coming! Through the blinding rain, Nancy caught a glimpse of a dark object. A rowboat! If only she could hold on until it reached her.